the most painful thing I think you can do to another human being is to isolate them and cut them off. That's why solitary confinement, is such an issue in the prisons and stuff, and why it's such an effective tool also in those environments, because that people will do almost anything to just not be alone. And when you're raised as Jehovah's Witness your whole life, when all of your family around you, all your friends are in that environment, when they cut you off and disfellowship you, you are put into solitary confinement.
Jehovah's Witnesses are a religious organization with reportedly over 8 million members across the world. They are Bible literalists who believe in Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, and maintain that Armageddon will occur in the near future.
The Watchtower organization said in 1889 that the world organizations would cease in 1914 and that Armageddon would take place. It didn't happen in 1914, they moved it to 1918, 1925. 1975 was the last one.
The organization prohibits any sexual contact outside marriage.
Where you're not really allowed to have any intimate physical contact with someone of the opposite sex. You get married really just so you can have sex.
They prohibit holiday celebrations such as birthdays and Christmas.
One time, me and another JW friend ate birthday cake at school, and then we got home and we told his mom because we felt so guilty about eating the cake.
Any political action such as voting, blood transfusions in the case of a medical emergency.
They have told their people they may not under any circumstances take human blood.
They discourage any university education that is not in the trades.
So you need just enough to go by because, the world's going to end anyway.
And the organization has a stern stance against homosexuality. There are also restrictions on what Jehovah's Witnesses should wear, what they watch, what they read, what they listen to, and the people they should surround themselves with.
I just kind of went in past the entryway and waited for him to get something. I saw his dad and his brother watching TV, and I remember the smells and the way it just I think as a kid I was frightened of it. I didn't know what was in there, what to expect.
While some witnesses may find solace in the organization's rigid ideology, others find it difficult to adhere to its rules, leading them to anxiety and depression.
My own doctor said he didn't have a single Jehovah's Witness patient that he saw that wasn't on antidepressants. Right? And that's a pretty common thing.
Those feelings of anxiety and depression are compounded by the fear that breaking the rules or leaving the organization will result in them being disfellowshipped and shunned by friends and family.
I never thought this could happen. I never, not in a million years, thought this could happen. Death took two of my brothers, and it never broke us up the way this has. In such a strange way.
I will be talking to former Jehovah's Witnesses about the struggles they faced being members of the organization and how their lives changed after they were disfellowshipped. If a teenager or minor is disfellowshipped, life at home can become difficult as the relationship between parent and child becomes strained. In many cases, the organization encourages parents to kick out their disfellowshipped children once they are 18 years old. I came to talk to Jody, who has a similar story.
I didn't today. No breakfast today, no.
He was disfellowshipped the day he finished high school after the organization discovered he had got a young woman pregnant.
Being in a small town, it doesn't take long for that to get around. And, I didn't tell my parents, we'll put it that way. Somebody else did.
And that's because Jehovah's Witnesses, they're almost encouraged to rat on each other,
Absolutely,
right?
They are. Yeah, they are. Police, to police them. Yeah. If you, basically what they tell you is if you've seen somebody do something and you didn't do anything about it, you are just as guilty in Jehovah's eyes by not doing the right thing and informing the elders.
So when you got this girl pregnant, your parents find out, right? Well, how does that conversation go?
Just my mom was home, and when I got there, she basically informed me that I needed to go to what they call a judicial meeting. So I went, and it went exactly how I expected it to. My dad wasn't home at the time. So it might have taken less than an hour, and they made that decision for the good of the congregation that they were going to disfellowship me. And they announced it right away, that I was disfellowshipped from the congregation, and people should avoid, in front of the whole congregation, that people should avoid contact with me, and and they gave the reason why, and everybody, like I said, turned around and looked, and
How did you feel in that moment?
pretty small at that moment. Like, I knew these people my whole life, and within that second, they were never going to speak to me again, and they never did. None of them. The boys in the congregation that were close to my age that I had grown up with, I mean, that was the last time that I talked to them. That was it. Next day at school, or it was nothing. Like, it was like I didn't even exist anymore. And things changed at home too, obviously. I mean, my parents, minimal communication. No more good morning, no more nothing. I mean, it was just minimal.
Because from what I can understand is that you got disfellowshipped in January, and then they said you had until you graduated
Until I graduated school, yeah.
So
that conversation took place right away. So within a day or two, when my dad returned home from work, we sat down. I expected to be booted out right there. My dad said he would allow me to stay as long as I attended the meetings. I could no longer go out and field service because you're not allowed to, obviously, but I had to attend the meetings. If I didn't, that was it. I was out. So I was allowed to stay there until I finished high school. So, and literally the day I finished high school, that was...
Can you talk about that?
That was it. Yeah, it was a pretty shitty day for me. Pretty shitty day, man. I can remember my stuff being outside, and my mom, I still can see her standing in the front window and just pointing at the road. A couple bags sitting outside, and that was it. I had no money. I had nothing. Nothing. I had my little Honda Civic car. I had maybe a quarter tank of gas in it, and that was it. I got into my car, and when we were kids, we used to hang out under a bridge, and I went there. And under the bridge, we had like not a cabin, but a little setup there, right? So I spent the night there, actually. I had slept there for a couple days, and those couple days I was very close to ending it. It definitely crossed my mind on several occasions, and rather quickly. I didn't know what to do. I mean, you're just a young kid. You no longer have a support network of any kind. I didn't really know. I knew some kids from school. I was friends with some kids, but not very many. Because nobody really wanted to associate with you. You were a Jehovah's Witness. You were not like the other kids, right? So yeah, it was I wouldn't say the lowest point of my life. That came later on, but I'd say it's pretty close, man. It's pretty close. It still burns me. That the doors are locked and you're not welcome here anymore.
Do you think it was difficult for your parents to do that?
No, I don't. They were that immersed in the Jehovah's Witnesses at that time that I broke the rules. That's what happens. That's what needs to be done. We're done with him. Mm-hmm. So unless you want to come back to Jehovah, we're done.
How difficult were those initial years of being alone?
Oh. Well, made a lot more difficult by alcohol and drugs. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. I mean, that's definitely what I turned to.
What do you think alcohol and drugs did for you?
Well, in hindsight, it didn't do anything.
In that moment.
It dulled it out. I mean, the bottle was my friend. You could get drunk and you could forget about everything, or you can get stoned and just not care, and then it became an everyday thing. That's just how I functioned. I did for the longest time. I did. It just washed it all away, and eventually, I put it so far down, I stopped thinking about it. It probably took 5 or 6 years for me to stop thinking about wondering what they were doing or if they even cared about me, which has weighed on my mind quite a bit. I mean, you were abandoned by your parents. And then I just got to that tipping point where I just didn't care anymore.
How long did it take you to reconnect with your family?
2011. So from 1989 or 1990, early 1990.
It's almost 20 years.
Yeah. 2011. And I have seen them 3 times since then.
What was that first interaction like?
It was weird. It was weird. It was it's like meeting strangers. You know. I didn't know them.
Did they ever actually apologize to you?
Not really. No, sort of. Like I said, my mom sort of made some awkward conversation that we had the first time I went there about the wishes things had went differently or something along those lines, and that was it. You know, I got no love for them anymore. I don't. I mean, even my sisters, I don't even know them. You know, I talk to my youngest sister once in a while, but the other two, I couldn't even tell you where they live. I know whereabouts they live, but that's about it.
Do the tattoos on your body, do they represent like what you went through?
Sure, everything does. I was lost without a sense of direction for a long time, and I self-abused for a long time. You know, and for me, like my life was complete anarchy. I always felt that for the longest time that I was all by myself, which I wasn't. You know, that's just something that I thought. You know, it was something that was beat into me. And if you leave Jehovah's organization, you're going to be on your own. And I always thought that I was. You know, and I was lost without a sense of direction for a long time until I was lucky enough to meet my wife, and you know, she put me on the straight and narrow. And I mean, I'll give her 100% credit as to why I'm sitting here right now. I mean, I'm not sure where I would be. My life was still in a fog when I first met her, and for some reason, she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and I owe her my life, basically, right? Yeah. You know, and having my daughter is just a bonus. It is, you know. I have even more reason to keep going and try to do better for myself, right? So, you know, tomorrow's another day.
I came to sit and talk with Jan.
Hi, Jan. How's it going? Come on in.
She had been a Jehovah's Witness for 23 years. As a teenager, she experienced verbal abuse from an elder and his wife. Later in life, she was disfellowshipped because of the action she took in the hopes of divorcing her ex-husband.
There was a situation, an elder and his wife, both full-time pioneer ministers, were rather abusive to people in the congregation on an emotional, verbal spectrum. Mm-hmm. And I think I took it harder than other people simply because at the time I was already suffering an undiagnosed mental illness. And being a teenager is always tough. You take things far too personally and you're just trying to figure out who you are. So because of it, I had a really rough go with my mental health. And before I was 17, inclusive, I attempted suicide 3 times. The first 2 times, I don't think my parents knew about. But the third time, I ended up in the hospital.
How did you go about attempting suicide?
It was always overdosing on things that were already in the house. Mm-hmm. But the last time I purposely went out to the pharmacy to make sure that I had enough. And at the time, I was also self-harming as well. So in retrospect, I know for a fact that it wasn't that I actually wanted to end my life, but I wanted the situation to be done, and I didn't want to deal with the pain anymore.
Did you ever tell your parents about the verbal abuse from this elder?
They knew. They knew that it had been going on, as did other people in the congregation, from what I gathered of casual conversations with people. But I don't think people kind of realized how bad it could get. And it was always sort of brushed off, because this couple was an elder pioneer couple, and they had ties with people higher up in the organization. So they were seen as exemplary, almost as if they could do no wrong.
So there was no disciplinary actions towards the elder or the wife?
No. Years after it had happened, when I finally was able to talk about it, more so in public, I did approach the elders in my new congregation regarding what had happened. And unfortunately, because there weren't two witnesses to any of this, it was just me, they weren't able to do anything. They essentially said, there's nothing we can do. The only thing that we can do is leave it in Jehovah's hands.
At that period, when you're going through these bouts of depression, were you always still a strict Jehovah? Or were you starting to doubt yourself at that time?
I think the abuse made me doubt it, but I thought that it was because I was somehow deficient spiritually, and that's why I was always down all the time. That's why I was always so negative. So when I moved to Edmonton, I thought it was like a new beginning. It was a new congregation, new set of brothers and sisters. It'll be a lot better. And it was for a while, but then things started creeping up in the back of my head. Doubts, questions about why things are the way that they are within the organization. And then eventually I think it was my marriage to a Jehovah's Witness brother that really was the last straw for me.
How old were you when you got married?
I was 19.
Did you hope that getting married was going to be like a new chapter in your life? It would bring you some sort of happiness that maybe you were missing before?
I almost felt obligated to get married because we had been seeing each other for several months, and in the back of my head, I knew that it wasn't working out. But there is an unspoken stigma that if you don't follow through, especially after several months of seeing each other, that there's something wrong, that you're looking to get married for the wrong reasons. So it generally is expected that you'll get married.
During that period when you guys are sort of seeing each other, there's obviously no sexual touching or anything. But kissing is fine?
I find it is highly dependent on the congregation that you're in. Some places are more liberal and some are more conservative. But generally the rule of thumb is don't do anything that could get you carried away. So as for us, we rarely kissed. We weren't allowed to be alone at any time with each other. So it's very strict.
Never allowed to be alone?
Yeah.
So always
we always had chaperones.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So during that 7-month period, do the elders in the organization, are they questioning you? Are they in the sense of what are you doing? Or are they encouraging you to get married?
So they essentially want to make sure that your intentions are good, that, you're not just dating person after person after person, but they also want to make sure that the organization, the congregation has a good standing, a good reputation. So they'll make sure that, you haven't done anything that'll bring reproach to them. And also, if you're planning on getting married inside the Kingdom Hall, place of worship for Jehovah's Witnesses, which is highly encouraged, the brother who is going to give the marriage sermon will ask you very directly if you've done any sexual activity or anything that he might not be then comfortable with giving the talk.
Why do you think they get so invasive with your sex life?
They say that it's to maintain the purity of the marriage arrangement and the purity of the congregation. I think it does come down to control, though, because overall they are quite controlling in people's lives, and sexuality is a form of personal expression, and they try to hinder that as much as possible, even in private matters like that, like sex.
Like, do you feel trapped in a sense because divorce is discouraged within the organization as well?
The only scriptural reason for divorce would be adultery, cheating on your spouse, your partner. And like if you talk to other sisters, they all have very similar stories. At the time, I thought that was the only way to get out of my marriage because I was frantically desperate trying to get out. So that's what I ended up doing. And the majority of ex-JW women that I've talked to have done the same thing.
So after the whole scenario happens, like, you go up in front of a judicial committee, right?
Correct.
And how many elders are there?
So the process is that initially there will be 2 elders to investigate whether or not a judicial committee needs to be formed. And then the actual judicial committee is 3 brothers. But in my case, they asked me, was it one time that you had sex with this person? Was it multiple times? Are you still in contact with them? They also asked if we used birth control. They also asked if I had an orgasm, interestingly enough, because apparently that indicates if I really wanted to do it or not. I'm not sure. Overall, it was very invasive. And afterwards, once they've gathered all that information, you're asked to leave the room. And then you'll be called back in with a decision. My decision took about 15 minutes or so, which felt like a long time. But when you think about it, isn't that long, considering that you're essentially handing out that person to be shunned from their friends and their family.
And your mother has stopped talking to you because you were disfellowshipped, right?
Yeah.
Is that tough?
It's very odd knowing that your mother supposedly cares for you. At least I'd like to think that she does, or that she did at one point. But she doesn't talk to you anymore, or come to visit you, or, even send you cards in the mail.
And you are their only child, right?
Yeah, correct.
Wow.
Yeah, and my mom is also an only child. So my maternal grandmother, I'm her only grandkid.
It's just, wow. It's more impactful, I think, like you're the only child and they're still able to stop. Your mom's completely able to cut you off like that. She is still a strong believer, you think? No?
No, I don't think so.
Why do you think she's not attempted to make contact with you anymore?
I do think it's because of their parents. All of my grandparents are still alive. And it sounds bad, but I think it'll be a lot easier for my mom and dad when my grandparents die, because my parents are being held in by them. And if they stop believing, or if they start talking to me, then they'll be cut off by their parents.